they do all that. So in this day and age, Alan, like what's your mentality on like how to actually build an organizational culture that's the right fit for the organization?
Yeah, wow, that is so critically important. I think, first of all, is recognize the fact that if you had a choice between strategy and culture, I think it's been tested time and time again that for sure, culture beats strategy every single time. A really great strategy with a bad culture is an ordinary result, I can assure you. So, if you sign up for that, understand that I think it's become even more difficult in today's environment with remote working. How do you change the culture? How do you even sort of get an assessment as to what your culture is? So that's made it a little bit more difficult. But I think it helps if you know where you've been, if you know where you are, and you know where you're going. Because if you know those three things, then I think you can then hone the culture to suit the circumstances that you have. And one of the big errors with developing the culture or even buffing it and slightly changing it is you've got to involve the frontline workers and involve them often and in a way that really allows them to truly express how they feel and what they see. I have never really learned anything about the business from behind my desk. But if I go out and talk to the customer, serve behind the counter, I learn a heck of a lot more than what I can learn about the culture from behind my desk. So I think involving frontline workers. And then there's this old adage of, why would I tell you how I feel if you're not approachable? I mean, and everyone says, oh, I'm very approachable. Nonsense. The fact that you have to tell yourself you're approachable is look around. Do people come to you first? Do you hear about something early? Or do you always hear about it when the barn is already burnt down? That's a travesty. So you need to make sure, involve the front line, be approachable, and be thoughtful of how you act and how you react. Because remember, the world's watching. And subtle gestures can seem like a sledgehammer when people's anxiety levels are high, or when if you're a public company, you get a report card every second of every day. So you need to be very thoughtful of how you react. And then one of the worst things I've seen is that the management team run away. They come up with whatever the organizational goals and vision and all that lovely stuff, and they keep it to themselves. Well, they stick it in a presentation deck that they give to the investors and the board, when really the folks that are responsible for executing that don't know what it is, and worse so, don't actually know what their role in achieving that is. And so when you build a culture, you need to make sure that one of the things that you do is that everybody knows what their role is in achieving that those goals. And if you can't find that connection, that's the first hint that that job maybe doesn't need to be there. And then, there's so many that don't walk the talk. And so you need to be able to make sure that you have one version of the truth. And then above all, there's honesty, because sometimes whatever you're doing just isn't working, right? And it just needs to be honest and say, okay, that isn't working, so let's figure out a different way to get to the end game. There's never only ever one way. And then personally, I think there's an important element to building a culture where you celebrate success and you also celebrate the odd failure. And sometimes it doesn't have to be a big success story or a big failure.
What do you mean by the odd failure?
Sorry?
What did you mean by the odd failure?
The odd failure, the hassle is that in the beginning, you try a lot of things and not everything is going to work exactly the way you thought. And the chances are, if you have a bad culture, it's because when somebody failed, something happened to that person, right? They got fired, they were no longer invited to the next meeting, whatever it is. And an organization that's trying to change their culture needs to figure out how to be okay with failure. Just don't make the same mistake again. And I have a bit of a saying that, fail fast. If something is not working after 3 days, leaving it in place for 3 weeks to turn around in 3 weeks time and say, it wasn't working, so we just kind of left it there to make sure. No, you've got another, 2 weeks to go. So, let it run the first week and then try something different. Eventually, you run out of things that don't work and then things start to work well. Now, you also need to do this pretty damn quick. So that's why I say fail fast.
It's awesome. And you've touched upon this thread a couple of times during our conversation thus far, but really the notion upfront of empowerment, right?
Right.
There's understanding that you are empowering your team and making sure that they can come up and, come up with suggestions, come up and be honest with you. And that kind of gets into that second piece of that honesty, right? That's very, very critical in the organization. What's working, what's not working, from a leadership perspective, from a mission and vision, and even just the execution. Right. I think that's very, very powerful. And the one thing too that is very notable is, as you mentioned, was you touched upon the thinking big picture. And there's always the people who praise the big picture vision of CEOs and visionaries, right? But it's that really that middle layer too, is making sure that middle layer, that middle management actually understands the vision and actually how to operationalize it. Right. I think that's something that when I think of couple of startups, that one of the notable things is as they progress within their business and as they start to grow and scale, one of the notable consistent trends is that middle layer is that there's an absence of that middle layer as they're trying to build out and grow and scale their teams. Is there's sometimes the top and then there's the bottom execution, and there's not really the connection in between them. So it's thanks again. Those are very, very well heard in terms of where, common things that I've seen. So it's huge. And so,
if I don't think we want to underplay the celebrate even small successes, because if you're waiting for in most businesses, there's no silver bullet that, on Tuesday when you deployed something, the world changed. Maybe with COVID it did, but that wasn't something within our control. And so if you wait too long to celebrate even minor successes, people get demoralized. And it's very hard to, feel like a winner when every day you're made to feel like a loser.
And that's actually very interesting you brought it up, because that was one of the things I learned within our startup is as we hit some very significant milestones in our business and really start to get great feedback from our customers and how we're actually streamlining their workflows, is that if I received that feedback on a Monday or a Tuesday, and I was like, I'll celebrate that on a Friday with my team or anything. By the time Friday came around, I was like, I don't care. Like it's over. It's old news. We're moving on. And it was just like, and so like, that's one of my things I keep telling people is like, oh, I just raised this money on a Tuesday. I'm like, celebrate now. Because by Friday, you won't care.
Yeah. And that's why, no, go ahead. I mean, most of us have a commute to work, right? Whether it's 5 minutes or 55 minutes, whatever it is. And there's no better time than on your way in to really question how you're going to pitch up when you walk in the front door, because you can see from the weekend's business, right? Whatever we tried didn't work. So going in and if you and beating people over the head with what they already know is not helpful. And leaders need to understand there's everything that you say has probably one of two impacts. It either motivates or it demotivates. So why not just inspire them to get to the next level and look beyond it? Okay, do we understand what didn't work? And then how do we handle that bad news? See, that's really important. Just like with your kids, you say to them, I want you to tell me the truth and come to me first. But if you act like a crazy person, then the kids are going to go to someone else, and that may not be a good idea.
And it's actually funny you bring that up. I was doing a reference call for someone on our team, and the reference check actually brought up a great analogy that I've always used after this. He's like, again, raising your kids and also the notion of empowerment. Whereas if you're telling your team member or you tell your kid, hey, shut the window, they're going to look at you. They're going to kind of they're going to be a little stubborn about it. But if you ask them, hey, I'm cold.
Right.
Can you please shut the window?
Yes.
Chances are they're going to shut the window.
Exactly.
Just thinking about that with your team.
There's a useful question to ask anybody in the organization, whether that's at the top, middle, or bottom tier, wherever you believe things land. But ask someone who works for the company, what is the biggest decision that you can make without checking with anybody? And wait for that answer and listen carefully to the answer you get. Can you imagine if you were in a coffee shop and the associate that was making the coffee said, I can refund any customer at any time without checking with the manager, or I can make the product right and give it to the customer. And I don't have to check with the manager. I don't have to get an authorization code. That's real empowerment, right? And you'd be surprised when you say, the people turn around and they say, well, the biggest decision I can make, wow. And you find out, wow, that's not, the customer doesn't even care about that decision, and nor do the employees.
I never actually thought about that. That's actually a really good question to ask. And now, obviously, it's like, well, I can do whatever I want. But before, I literally just thought about the last, my last two like corporate jobs. I'm like, that's interesting. Like, I never asked myself that, or anybody else that.
And many times it's, well, don't you think you can? I mean, the basic functions of hiring and firing and making the customer happy. If they aren't empowered to do that, then I'm not sure what their role in the whole process is, and it speaks to a bad culture. And quite often, when you say, "Well, would you like to have that power to, do the right thing right there?" and the answer generally is yes. Well, why don't you? And you'll often find there is their boss says, "You don't do it that way. You do it my way." And that's why I'm a big fan. They're one version of the truth. And around empowerment, you need to be very clear where the lines are so that people can act with confidence. We all want to please.
Awesome. Well, we are almost at 30 minutes, I want to say, but TK, if you want to, if there's any last minute things that we want to talk about before.
Yeah, I think the last thing actually would be the question of why now? Is as we start to think about that big picture vision and we start to think about challenges within the business, is understanding. Sometimes I've had one person say to me, it's about understanding when you have challenges, what are the fires you actually want to put out? Like, what is the order of priority? Because there's always different challenges facing the business and there's always different opportunities. So understanding what are the ones you actually prioritize for your team, and think about as those things evolve, as you go from 3, 6, 9 months, understanding how those priorities may change.
Yeah, complicated question. First of all, I think if you are clear about what the strategy is, then anything that is off strategy, kick it to the curb. That gets rid of 80% of the stuff that, might sound easy to do, but if it's off strategy, why spend 1 second on it? So I would start there. That leaves only that many things to prioritize. The second thing is, I can guarantee you one thing about your priorities: there's nothing ever works exactly the way you thought. No matter how talented you are, it never works exactly the way you thought. So you need to be very flexible. And one of the problems with priorities and flexibility is that people think they need a Hail Mary or to bet the farm. And this is business, right? A Hail Mary and a betting the farm is high stakes poker. And if it's your own money, well, I guess you can do anything you like. And to do justice to this topic, I think if you were looking for a summer reading list, there's probably 2 books that I would call out. One is an oldie and a goodie, and it's on the endangered species list, I'm sure, but you can still get it. It's an old book called Good to Great. And even though it's been around for a while, there are still some very, very good lessons that can be applied in today's modern world. And then the second is a book that I recently got hold of, which is Greg Creed, who used to be the CEO of Yum Brand. And he wrote a book called Red Marketing, The 3 Ingredients to Leading Brands. It is really worth a read of those. And then I would just say, with your priorities, make sure you surround yourselves with truth seekers and disciplined thinkers, because truth seekers will call out early when something is going wrong, and disciplined thinkers will teach you about the business, tell you what isn't working, but also come up with a plan to achieve whatever goal that you're trying to achieve. And at the same time, linking this question to some of the other questions that you had, is evolving your culture to, understand that it's not going to be static and nothing is forever, Blockbuster case. And many priorities are put on the back shelf because you're too afraid to learn by doing. And I think that's dangerous. You should try to learn by doing, but not through Hail Marys or betting the farm. And don't, for goodness sake, try and do it on your own. A problem shared is a problem solved and a problem halved. And there's a lot of great teamwork that comes with the prioritizing things and knowing that when you put your head on the pillow And you can say to yourself, am I working on the right big things right now? And if the answer to that question is yes, and there are other things that aren't being done, sleep well. Seriously. I mean, otherwise you're always tormented about the few things that you didn't get to do. But if they're not that important, then move on.
Yeah. I love it. The last funny quote is like just my own. People are always like, as a founder, how do you do everything? And it's like, I don't do a lot of things. I don't do them very well. But Alan, this was fantastic.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you so much, Alan.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I'll put, obviously I'll upload this onto the YouTube channel, but then I'll break down little clips and put it into LinkedIn and Instagram and all that. And I'll tag you on it on LinkedIn so that if people want to, get to know you more or whatnot, obviously your schedule is not easy. So, but I will tag you on it just so they know who it is. So, and obviously TK, same thing. This is fun. I love it. This was a lot of fun. So I think I'm going to love doing the rest of this stuff too. So.
No.
And Alan, I have to ask, and sorry, this is a bit of an ignorant question, but what can we do to help you with, like,